Roman Reigns was on the receiving end of a rare beatdown on SmackDown. Jimmy Uso also teased a reunion to close out the show. The whole Bloodline saga has been the centerpiece of SmackDown for over a year now. The group originally consisted of Solo Sikoa, Roman Reigns, the Usos, and Paul Heyman. However, Jey Uso left the group and joined Monday Night Raw. This year, the Bloodline underwent a massive transition after Solo Sikoa's hostile takeover of the group. He kicked out Jimmy Uso and Paul Heyman and added new members like Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, and Jacob Fatu to the group in Roman's absence. When the OTC returned from hiatus, he began feuding with Solo, but he was all alone in his battle, until Jimmy Uso returned at Bad Blood as well. Tonight on SmackDown, Jimmy Uso pleaded with Reigns that they need help to fight the Bloodline. He was talking about Jey Uso, but Reigns disagreed. Later on in the night, Reigns and Jimmy were on the receiving end of a brutal beatdown at the hands of the Bloodline. After the beatdown, Jimmy Uso could be heard telling his cousin that they needed help again, indicating that he was talking about Jey Uso. On a recent episode of WWE SmackDown, fans were left speechless as Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, suffered a brutal and unexpected beatdown that not only shook the foundations of the Bloodline, but also ignited long-standing tensions within the WWE Universe. The storyline that has been building for months finally reached a boiling point, and to the surprise of many, it involved none other than his estranged cousin, Jimmy Uso, who teased a shocking reunion after 14 months of being on the outs with Reigns and the Bloodline. Roman Reigns has been the dominant force in WWE since he returned with his new tribal chief persona, leading the Bloodline, a stable that includes Jimmy and Jey Uso, as well as Solo Sikoa and the ever-present Paul Heyman. Reigns has been unstoppable, holding on to the WWE Universal Championship for over 1,000 days. However, as with any family dynasty, internal strife has been simmering just beneath the surface. In the months leading up to this shocking SmackDown episode, the cracks in the Bloodline had become more and more apparent. Jey Uso, in particular, had grown increasingly frustrated with Reigns' dictatorial leadership. Their bond had been severely tested multiple times from the early days of Jey submitting to Reigns to preserve their family to his eventual departure from the Bloodline earlier this year. Jimmy Uso had a similar trajectory but took a different path, choosing to walk away quietly after becoming disillusioned with the direction of the family. However, after 14 months of absence and silence, Jimmy's sudden return to the spotlight sparked rumors that something major was about to go down. He had been absent from WWE programming, leaving Jey to deal with the fallout of the Bloodline's implosion. Fans wondered what Jimmy's intentions were, especially since he had never fully turned on his cousin in a public way like Jey had. The October 2024 episode of SmackDown began like any other, with Roman Reigns making his way to the ring, flanked by Paul Heyman and Solo Sikoa. His dominance was on full display as he prepared to address his latest challengers and reiterate his superiority over the WWE roster. However, the tension in the air was palpable. The WWE Universe could sense that something was brewing, and the question on everyone's mind was, where would Jimmy Uso fit into all of this? As Reigns stood in the center of the ring, the familiar sound of the Usos' theme song blared through the arena. The crowd erupted as Jimmy Uso made his way down the ramp. His expression was unreadable, but there was an undeniable sense of purpose in his stride. After months of silence, Jimmy had returned, and it looked like he had something to say. Standing face to face with Roman Reigns, Jimmy picked up a microphone and began to speak. He acknowledged the history they shared, from their childhood growing up together to their dominance as part of the Bloodline. But then Jimmy dropped the bombshell. He wasn't there to reunite or fall back in line. He was there to remind Roman that family was supposed to be built on respect, not fear. Reigns, clearly agitated, demanded that Jimmy show the tribal chief the respect he deserved. But before Reigns could finish his sentence, the lights in the arena dimmed. What followed was a series of events that would leave the WWE Universe in disbelief. Out of nowhere, a group of masked attackers stormed the ring. At first, it seemed like a random assault, but as the figures laid into Roman Reigns with brutal efficiency, it became clear that this was a planned ambush. Paul Heyman frantically screamed for help as Solo Sikoa tried to fend off the attackers, but the numbers were overwhelming. Reigns, usually the picture of dominance, was quickly overwhelmed. The masked assailants targeted his ribs, legs, and back, methodically breaking down the man who had been nearly untouchable for years. For the first time in a long while, the WWE Universe saw Roman Reigns vulnerable, struggling to fight back as the onslaught continued. Solo Sikoa managed to take out one or two of the attackers, but even his brute strength wasn't enough to turn the tide. In the midst of the chaos, Jimmy Uso stood at the edge of the ring, watching the assault unfold. The WWE Universe was left in suspense, wondering what Jimmy's role in all of this was. Would he step in to save his cousin? Or was he part of the plan? The answer came moments later. As Reigns lay battered on the mat, struggling to pull himself up, Jimmy slid into the ring. For a brief moment, it looked like Jimmy might help Reigns, just as they had done countless times before when they fought together. But instead, Jimmy delivered a vicious superkick straight to Roman's jaw. The crowd gasped in shock. Jimmy Uso had just turned on Roman Reigns in the most brutal fashion imaginable. The betrayal was now complete, and the WWE Universe was left to grapple with the fallout. After the beatdown, Jimmy grabbed the microphone once again. This time, there was no ambiguity in his words. He made it clear that his 14-month absence had given him time to reflect on everything that had happened within the bloodline. He spoke about how Reigns had manipulated and controlled them, how he had made them all believe that loyalty meant servitude. Jimmy declared that he was no longer under Roman's thumb, and that the beatdown was a message. He didn't just want to leave the bloodline. He wanted to destroy it from within, starting with the man who had built it up. The masked attackers, who had now revealed themselves as a group of new, younger talents from WWE's developmental brand, NXT, stood beside Jimmy, signaling that a new faction was in the works. This alliance represented not just a rejection of Roman's leadership, but a broader rejection of the status quo in WWE. Just when it seemed like Jimmy had fully severed ties with Roman and the bloodline, the biggest twist of the night occurred. Jey Uso's music hit, and the arena exploded with cheers. Jey, who had been embroiled in his own battles with Reigns and the bloodline, walked down to the ring. As Jey stepped inside the ropes, he locked eyes with his brother. The WWE Universe held its breath. Would Jey join Jimmy in this rebellion, or would he continue his own path of independence? In an unexpected moment, Jey didn't attack Jimmy. Instead, the two brothers shared a silent stare that spoke volumes. The tension between them was still there, but the fact that Jey didn't immediately turn on Jimmy suggested that a reunion between the brothers might not be off the table. Jey eventually left the ring without saying a word, leaving fans to speculate about what his next move would be. Would the Usos reunite to finally take down Roman Reigns? Or would Jey chart his own course, leaving Jimmy to wage war on his own? As SmackDown went off the air, the WWE Universe was left with more questions than answers. Roman Reigns, the once unstoppable tribal chief, had been laid low in a brutal beatdown, and his empire seemed on the verge of collapse. Jimmy Uso's betrayal had sent shockwaves through WWE, and the possibility of a reunion with Jey added even more intrigue to the storyline. The Bloodline, once the most dominant faction in WWE history, now stood on shaky ground. With Jimmy's new faction in play and Jey's intentions unclear, the future of Roman Reigns and his reign as champion was uncertain. One thing was for sure, though. WWE had just turned the page on a new chapter of one of its most compelling storylines, and the road ahead promised to be more unpredictable than ever.